Welcome to my lore news segment where I talk about the latest updates to lore. Today we'll be talking about a rather dense Showdown post made on March 15th, 2022. This post focuses on a topic we recently covered in Galactic Historian, AI and Star Citizen, but has a few other references which might lead to future gameplay. For those of you who haven't read a lore post like Showdown, the concept is that it's part of the transcript for a show that's broadcast on Spectrum, the in-fiction version of the internet for the UEE. Showdown is a political discussion show which brings two sides of a topic and has them debate one another, similarly to many modern cable news shows. These are great posts to help you get the feel for how the public in lore are feeling about any hot-button issue in the verse at one time. This Showdown discusses Imperator Laylani Addison's latest attempt to reopen AI research, called the Better Today Act, which would weaken some of the restrictions and open the door for government-funded research on the topic. Again, I do a deeper breakdown of the AI in a video linked in the top right. But a quick and dirty summary is that AI is banned in the UEE, because every time one is developed, it ends up killing thousands of people, or nearly causing interstellar conflicts. In this Showdown, we hear from an AI advocate, Una Glidewell, who's also an engineer, and Mahir Lemond, who wrote a book on the 2044 Lemming car incident, and their thoughts on the new proposed law. Not surprisingly, Glidewell is ecstatic about the new law. They make the point that the lack of AI development has slowed down progress, and points to it being essential to catch up or even to leap over the technological development of the Xi'an, though she does admit there is no evidence that the Xi'an have AI tech themselves. This is the first mention in lore that humanity is about a century behind in the Xi'an in terms of technology, something that could be inferred by their longer presence on the galactic stage and their often just better technology when it comes to ships and weapons. They also argue that the lack of AI tech has significantly stagnated humanity's growth, pointing out that their sun flies a ship that was built in 2874, while in the early years of spaceflight, new models of spacecraft were releasing at a much faster pace. Glidewell goes on to say that AI would be faster and more efficient, able to develop better ships faster in ways that humans are far too limited in being able to achieve. This was the main point I hit on in the video, that AI is one of the reasons why ship tech is so dated, simply because the complexities of interstellar commerce makes older, more reliable designs just easier to make with slight tweaks. Thus, new designs take decades or even centuries to be truly produced. They continued to say that the end goal of AI tech was AI soldiers, doctors, ATCs, and pilots, all with the objective of saving human lives. Glidewell also mentioned that the new philosophy of AI development, combined with new safeguards, allows for modern AI researchers to protect human life in the event of a failure similar to past disasters which have haunted AI development. Lemond, on the other hand, is concerned about the new proposed law, saying that it isn't worth the risk, citing that every time humanity developed AI, it either went rogue or malfunctioned and killed people. They gave the first actual death toll for the Lemming car incident of 2044, which is 12,465, with countless injured. They also mentioned the Mars tragedy of 2125, where an AI collapsed the mostly complete atmosphere, killing the entire Mars terraformation team, the Horus Incident of 2696, where AI was inserted into bombers who then went rogue to attack the Xi'an Empire, and a new incident we hadn't heard before, the explosion of Sarita Tower in 2298. It's notable that Lemond did not mention the Artemis. Though it's arguably the most famous example of the failure of AI, it has never been confirmed that the AI was to blame for the ship being lost. They argue that progress is being made even without AI, mentioning regen tech as an example of new innovation that didn't involve anything even remotely like AI, and that human development often comes in spurts rather than long arcs, mentioning that steam power had been around for 1,000 years before it was used during the Industrial Revolution. Lemond also point out that the fundamental design of water ships hasn't changed for thousands of years, save for material and slight tweaks, because the old design just works. Lemon continued to prove his point by pointing to a recent development by the UE Army in 2947 for a new drone. The Army fed the necessary data into a complex algorithm and got back a new designs inspired by avian skeletons. Now, this is something interesting. This is an unusual addition to the lore, as a similar method was used by Anvil in the creation of the Valkyrie. But here the team is going out of their way to insert something new we have never heard before: the Army-based drones. Of course, this may be nothing, but often the CIG narrative team adds references to something which will be added into the game in the near future. You see, narrative is one of the first and last parts of the process of everything from ships to gameplay. They're the first called in to help flesh out an idea from the design teams before they begin work on something in the game, and then are called back once everything is in the final stages to write down concrete descriptions and lore for the part which is being added. This is how I have been able to guess at ships being added months in advance based on lore posts made. The tricky part is some of the lore might just end up being flavor, as the initial ideas pivot into something different. For example, the narrative team wrote a backstory for the crashed Javelin on Daymar in anticipation for the wreck becoming a point of interest, after the Montreal team turned it into a landing zone while practicing with the tools that CIG gave them. They even announced that they would be adding it into the game in the near future. But instead, it looks like the team pivoted from that work to making more procedural crash sites and wreck landing zones, which have already started making their way into the game. These avian drones may be nothing, but I suspect they may be the basis of something like combat or scout drones, which could be used as deployable equipment for FPS combat, as deployables have been getting a look in over the last few months by the FPS teams. Either way, we know that the UE Army actively uses drones, which will likely manifest into something in the game when we start to see drones develop. The last point Lemon makes is that even if AI proponents get everything they want, they will create a race of thinking and feeling slaves to solve humanity's problems, bringing up the ethical dilemma of creating what amounts to a new species just to solve humanity's issues. This entire segment almost seems like a response to the video I made earlier this year, and even if it wasn't, it's nice to have the clarification on the subject of AI in the verse. It clearly lays out the arguments on both sides of this issue, while also reminding us that this is something which we will eventually take part in the game, as we will be helping to decide the future and fate of AI research, likely through a future event. That was Showdown, A Better Today from March 15th, 2022. If you like this format and want to see me continue to do this with future releases of lore, let me know in the comments below. If you're new and haven't already done so, think about hitting the subscribe button. I want to thank those on screen now for continuing to make it possible for me to do these videos. And if you want to join them, think about becoming a patron yourself by hitting the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and remember, Ex Historia ad Astra.